Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Arts show, where we celebrate books, music, visual, and the performing arts. Welcome to Feast of Words, a books and authors show featured on our Big Blend Radio Toast to the Arts podcast channel. This month, we are airing a 4-part series focusing on debut novels. Part 1 is all about the leading ladies. Part 2 is all secrets and journeys. You can check the episode notes for the links to listen to both of them. Today is part 3, and the theme is Roots and Revolutions. And we're digging deep into the past to understand how history, family, and heritage shape who we are today. We're talking with Matt Cost about the Cuban Revolution, Mike Nemeth about hidden Southern family secrets, Anna Dalhaimer Bartkowski on the mysteries of genealogy, and Clifford Garstang on the spiritual ghosts that haunt family traditions. These are stories of resilience, identity, and finding the truth. Stay with us, and we'll be right back after this short message to start the conversation. Education is the path out of poverty, but sometimes the barrier is as simple as a pair of shoes or a school uniform. The Steps of Henry Foundation provides these essentials, including tuition for girls in need in Africa and Mexico. Support this work by purchasing the books of the late airline captain, author, and world traveler Henry Bernanke at theglobalhenry.org. 100% of your purchase goes directly to the kids. Give the gift of a book and fund the gift of an education at theglobalhenry.org. So everyone, we have author Matt Cost back on the show. And we're excited because he really writes a lot and has a number of novels. And we're excited because we're going to delve into the historical fiction and talk about his debut novel, as we are with this entire episode, with all the different writers who have also written books and done a number of books. But he's also well known for mysteries. So you can go to mattcost.net to learn more. He's going to talk about his debut novel, I Am Cuba, Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. And that's under his Matthew Langdon Cost name. So you've got 2 names. I don't know. We may have to check you out. I don't know. He's got an alias. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, much like my mysteries, who they often have aliases in my books, I guess I too have an alias.
Okay, why not? Why not? So historical fiction is where you started. Did you think you would end up in mystery as well?
I hadn't really planned that direction right off, but I always loved mysteries. So to tell you the truth, I'd written a few historical fiction books before I turned to mysteries. And one of the things that did that was I went to a crime conference of mystery writers. And I said, hey, these are really my people. I could get along with these people. So I started writing more and more mysteries.
Well, there's a lot of mystery in history, as we know, right? And we've talked about on the shows before, but tell us a little bit about your journey into writing, because you've worn many hats in your life, from teacher to video store. I mean, telling people to be kind, rewind, to now being a full-time novelist, right? And wait, first, how many books do you have now that are all published?
I have 18 books that are published. So traditionally published with 2 different publishers. And that sort of, segues into when I started writing, which was 1991. I wrote my first book, which is I Am Cuba.
Okay, so wow. But then it got published in 2020, right?
Yeah, 2020.
This is some inspiration for everybody out there writing and wondering what's going to happen with their book that's, for a couple decades, right? That's amazing.
Absolutely. Anybody trying to do the math out there, that's 29 years. So it's pretty much a shooting star right to success.
Wow, there it is. I love it. Well, 1991 was an excellent year. It's the year I graduated high school. So there you go. That's so important. But when you start the 29 years, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. I'm just going,
I should not have brought that up. I'm sorry.
No. But yeah, so I Am Cuba. So tell us a little bit about how you even thought of I'm going to write a novel. What was the inspiration to actually do a novel? There's one thing writing stories and essays, but a novel's like a commitment, a 29-year one.
Probably since I was 8 years old, I had in the back of my head that I'd like to be a writer because I enjoyed reading books like The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and things like that. So I'd like to be a writer someday. And when I graduated college, I had an idea given to me by a professor at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, who was so passionate about his Latin American history course that it turned me on to Cuba, and I decided I really would like to write a book about Cuba. And I narrowed it down to realize that Fidel Castro was a fascinating person and the Cuban Revolution was a really fascinating event. So I started writing about Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution, which is from 1953 to 1959.
So did you get to go to Cuba?
Well, one of the things that happened when I finished writing the draft of the book was I realized three things. One, I was a terrible writer. And so I really needed to work on my craft of writing. The two, I needed to do more research. And that kind of dovetails into number three, which is I needed to do research in Cuba. I felt like the draft lacked authenticity, sincerity with not never having been to Cuba. So I went about working on my writing craft and I went about the thing of life of raising four kids and owning three businesses and teaching school and things like that. And finally, in 2016, I got a chance to go visit Cuba and I designed my own trip there so that I followed Fidel Castro's Revolutionary War trail across the island nation of Cuba. So I brought my son with me as my interpreter. We flew into Havana and then took a plane down to Santiago and then came back across following the trail of Fidel Castro and his guerrillas as they marched to victory finally. And so that really helped me. And I went back and rewrote and finished the book. I felt like my writing was better. I've been researching more and more information for years. And now I had visited Cuba. So I finished it, found a publisher, got it published, and now we're 18 books in.
Wow, that's amazing. But isn't it good to actually have time in between so that when you're talking about you felt like it lacked authenticity at the time, that sincerity about it? When you go back, you have to like walk away from things sometimes to be able to revisit it, or were you able to finish the draft, then reread it immediately to figure out where you wanted to go with things on your writing?
And I don't know that I really needed 29 years. I do when I finish a draft of a book now, give it just a couple weeks before I begin my own personal edits to let it breathe a little bit. A couple weeks is usually fine. I don't need any
Okay.
more than that. I certainly do. I guess I started rewriting in 2016 or 2017, so that'd only be 25 years
Wow.
of breathing.
So it's a commitment, though, like I was saying, to actually go and write a whole novel. I mean, and this was a 29-year commitment, which is, why not? Getting started, I mean, when you were first writing it, did you like have a schedule of writing? Like, I'm going to get up at 5 in the morning and write every morning until it's out there in the world? Or how does that work when you're balancing life too? Or do you just
Yeah.
shelve it at that point and go, okay, I'll come back to it when everyone's grown up?
I've always been a morning writer, even in 1991, which is me just fresh out of college, mind you. I was still getting up in the mornings to do my writing as opposed to sleeping to the last possible second before going off to work. But there were no kids and no coaching gigs. Things were a lot easier back then, and more time was to be had. As I continued working on writing through the years, I started getting up at 4:30 in the morning before the kids got up to work on my writing. So
Yeah. The 4 in the mornings are the best times in the world. It's just, I love to see the sunrise. I like if it does rise, depending on where, I know it rises, but depending on the weather, but there's that solitude where you can actually think.
I often still start writing at 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes by 8 o'clock, I've reached my lower quota for the day of words that I feel like I need to write, and I've walked the dogs and I've had a full day, and it's only 8 a.m., so that's pretty wonderful.
It is cool. That is cool. So give everyone a little bit about, Fidel Castro and following his footsteps and his rise to power, how that happens. because it's really fascinating to me how leaders become leaders, whether they're good or bad leaders, how they get a following. Was that part of it for you? I know Nancy loves I Am Cuba. She adores that book. That's a shining star for her. She loves it. And she keeps going, you got to finish it, because I have a thing about Cuba, and it's about the music, I think, more than anything. But there's, I don't know, there's a romanticism to that wonderful culture and just the buildings, the architecture. But people really didn't have a good life a lot of times in Cuba, not really a profitable one. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting history. But yeah, what do you think made him a leader that was, people followed, that you can get a guerrilla and behind you, all these people behind you to fight and put their lives on the line?
It's a long and a short story, really, is, the history of Cuba has shown them to be pulled and pushed between different entities and used and abused by lots of people, the United States notwithstanding, but Spain included in there and other European countries. And, the United States has had long thought of annexing Cuba and making it the 51st state. And so there was a lot of powerful United States interests that had backed the dictator Batista, who was in power when this young lawyer in Havana started coming to prominence and speaking up against Batista and wanting to, free Cuba and make it a free country and away from the dictators. And he started getting a bit of a following. And eventually, in July 26th of 1953, led an attack of 120 men, mostly college graduates, young college graduates from Havana, who drove down to Santiago all the way across the island nation and attacked the Moncada military barracks there. And it was, I guess I can't swear, but it was a terrible event. It was a disaster.
The
It was a
bloodbath.
disaster. It was poorly planned. It was poorly done. Fidel Castro and his followers were pretty much shellacked. A smattering of them escaped into the mountains and were rounded up and imprisoned. And that's the start of the Cuban Revolution. Should I continue through the story a little bit, or
Tell everybody a little bit more, yeah, because it's so fascinating. Because I think every time we have a new president, it's like, you can go, you can't go. We're going to do this. It's not ending what's happening between us and Cuba. But this guy, I mean, just going for it, getting people behind you, and then, hey, I'm going to keep going. You fall down, but you still get up.
Yeah, Fidel Castro spends the next 18 months in prison, along with the other survivors of the attack on the Moncada barracks, which was July 26th. So for the longest time, they called it the July 26th movement, is what their group was known as. And finally, Batista granted them amnesty and released them from prison because there was sort of a groundswell of support for them. And Fidel and his other people thought that it might be a chance for the government to assassinate them. So as soon as they were released from prison, they went into self-imposed exile in Mexico, where they started planning their next invasion, which in 1956, they overcrowded a luxury yacht named the Grandma with 81 people and set sail from Mexico to Cuba to start a revolution. Again, poorly planned. They didn't have all the plugs in the boat. It was leaking. They had bad seas. People were getting sick. They got stuck on a sandbar 100 yards offshore of Cuba and had to get off and wade into shore with their rifles over their heads into a mangrove swamp. They took a day to get through the mangrove swamp. By then, the Cuban army knew they were there and came and bombed them. And of the 81 men, 18 survived and went into hiding in the Sierra Maestra Mountains of down by Santiago, Cuba. And that is the second start to the revolution.
Gosh, so you're doing all this history, all this research. I know you taught history, so this is in your wheelhouse, but now you're fictionalizing this, but keeping it historically accurate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I use a fictional character to tell the story, actually. Vicente Bolivar, who is kind of, I create as a right-hand man, starting out as an aide and becoming integral to Fidel Castro. And one of the reasons I do this is because I think it makes it more real, more true. If I tried to tell it through Fidel Castro's eyes, well, we know there's two different camps on Fidel Castro. There's a carefully manipulated version of him that he puts out himself as a sort of Messiah-like figure. And then there's the exiles that have come to America who have been kicked out of Cuba and their wealth stripped from them, who really hate him. So neither one of these is completely accurate. So Vicente Bolivar is my attempt to find a middle ground between these two polar opposites.
Wow, this is cool. This is exciting. Now, did you have fun in Cuba? I want to know, did you have a good time? I know you're doing work, but I mean, did you have fun?
Every bit of it was fun, even the work of,
Yeah.
I mentioned the Moncada barracks. We went there and we saw the bullet holes that were still filled the walls that were kept intact. And we went up into the Sierra Maestra where for several years, anywhere from 18 to 300 bearded guerrillas held out against a Cuban army of 10,000 soldiers. And I kind of discovered between the heat and the humidity and the rugged terrain and the height of it all, how that was actually possible because it was a very difficult climb up there. So many things like that, the battle in Santa Clara. But on top of that, we had fun. My son, who I brought as an interpreter for me, really didn't do a very good job interpreting until we got salsa lessons from two young ladies. Then all of a sudden he could talk perfectly.
That's funny. But this is when you're, talking about actually following in the footsteps truly, that is the best research. You can really visualize. I mean, I know we talked about this at Every Hazard about going to Gettysburg, but when you go to Gettysburg, you can feel that feeling. It's never going to be 100% as if you were there in that era, but that it's that authenticity that you bring to writing is going out there and just trying to feel even the weather and the smells and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Right. No,
You go around
absolutely.
sniffing.
And sincerity are the two things for sure.
All right. So are you going to read for us?
Sure.
Cool.
That book there.
There it is. I
don't know if it'll show up on my screen, so I'll point to it.
Okay. Is it I Am Cuba or Cuba when you were there?
Because my Spanish skills are poor, I say Cuba.
Okay. All right. So yeah, what are you going to read?
Sort of from the very beginning. There's a little bit before this, but this is, again, the book is based on the Cuban Revolution, which started in July 26, 1953, and is going to end on January 8th of 1959 when Fidel Castro rolls into Havana and takes over the country after the flight of Batista and the top officials. So I'm sort of starting it off here with the attack on the Moncada barracks, which in a minute and a half to 2 minutes, we won't get a whole lot, but we'll get a snapshot. In 2 hours, we'll attack the Moncada military barracks in Santiago. This is not a training exercise. The young lawyer spoke quietly in the early morning darkness of the isolated farmhouse in Siboney. Vicente glimpsed the shocked faces in the flickering candlelight, for most thought they were being rewarded with a trip to Carnival, while others believed it was just more play acting at being revolutionaries. It was hard to believe that soon they would be fighting, and almost certainly killing, Cuban soldiers. Emotionally, many were unready to take the leap from rhetoric to action. In a few hours, we'll be victorious or defeated, he continued. But regardless of the outcome of this battle, this moment will triumph. If we succeed tomorrow, Marty's aspirations will be fulfilled sooner, but either way, they will be realized. Fidel continued to speak at length, but for Vicente Bolivar, all noise had condensed into a steady hum seemingly generated from the very earth itself. He'd known, after all, that his training over the past year was for exactly this moment, the violent overthrow of Batista's regime. Yet that's all been more like a game. This was real, as his dry throat and sweat-soaked shirt reminded him. He could smell the fear in the room as over 100 people processed the importance of life and death. Our plan is dangerous, and anyone who leaves with me in the morning will have to do so willingly. Fidel's brown eyes gazed at each of them in turn, their expressions hidden in the darkness, as was his, vague glints in the candlelight behind his glasses. His tightly curled black hair was cut short, and Vicente noticed that he'd recently shaved his mustache. His newly bare face made him look even younger than his 27 years, his smooth cheeks giving him the appearance of a boy and not a man. That's not
Wow.
the Fidel Castro that most people get an image of when they think of him.
No,
He
no,
was
I think
vibrant
that's
and young and boyish and
yeah. You're trying something, but I love the going into where people are thinking whether or not it's like, okay, I'm getting myself into this, and then it starts to seep in the reality of what they're going to do, and it's like, am I really ready? Do I really want to do this, or do I want to run for the hills the other way?
right.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk tough. It's another to get a rifle and go shoot at soldiers.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on it. Nancy read it and loved, like I was saying, loved it. I haven't had a chance yet, and we've been carrying this book across the country with us. You know,
Yeah.
she's like, it's our book.
Had it for a few years, I think. So
It's
time
all
for you
right.
to
I'll
get
keep
onto
holding.
it.
Nancy gets more time to read, and she loves it, and she just loves her actual physical books. She's like, this is it, and she kept telling me about it all throughout. That's the thing about her. I have to wait, and it has to, my brain, it has to be more than 2 weeks in between when she reads a book and when I get to read a book, because she spills the beans. When she gets excited by a book, she starts telling me everything. And I'm like, all right, thanks, Mom. Well, very cool. I mean, are you going to do another historical fiction, do you think?
I don't know if I'll do straight up historical fiction, but as you know a little bit, I've decided to combine my two loves of histories and mysteries. And so I have the mystery series, which has two books in it set in 1920s Brooklyn, New York. And then next October, I'll be debuting a new series set in 1950s Raleigh, North Carolina, with a Jazz Jones and January Queen mystery. So I get my history fixed by those two series probably, but we'll see.
I'm excited about that. That area is a trip. I know you go there, and so do we, and we'll be there soon. And there's a lot of history, just even the farming, and the history is deep in that region. It really does roll deep. Even when you think about when universities are built and things like that, like who decided we're going to do this, So I'm excited to hear about all that.
Yeah, and that's a fun part of the research is, everything, whether it be a phrase or a word or a building there, you have to see if it was there then,
Okay.
if that phrase existed then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's very cool. Well, everyone, mattcost.net is the website to go to, and it is the holiday season. So, for all those history mystery lovers out there, you know where to go, to mattcost.net. And you're on bookshop.org, Amazon, all those places, but also check out your local bookshops this holiday season. Very cool to have you back on the show. We'll talk again soon.
Fantastic, Lisa. Thanks.
So everyone, very excited to have Mike Nemeth back on the show. He's an award-winning author, and he's written quite a number of books. But today he's going to talk about his very first novel. It is called The Undiscovered Country. It won 2 literary awards, and it is also out now for you to go and get. It came out in 2018, I believe, and you can go to MikeNemethAuthor.com. Link is in the episode notes as always. So welcome back. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Glad to have you.
Always. So this is the first novel. What was that like? And how many do you have out now? Because you've also written nonfiction.
Yeah, 4 novels, 2 nonfiction.
Okay.
With the 5th novel coming early next year.
And that's the prequel to what you're talking about today.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
You like to write prequels.
I learned from Taylor Sheridan. 1883 and 1923. He's got prequels for prequels. But very successfully, and in the undiscovered country, in the reading I'm going to do today, we come to know that Randall, the main character, has only just been released from prison. And then we don't really talk a lot about that until much later in the book. And people don't really know, okay, why has this very nice person been to prison? So the prequel is all about how that happened.
Okay, we want the scandal. This is good. So, what was it like writing your first novel? What was it for you that said, "Okay, I'm going to write a book"? Aren't you part of like the whole November write a book movement?
Oh, no, 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 I've never been a part of that at all. No, what actually happened was my mother passed away, and it had a very impactful impact on me. It's not that it was unexpected, but the way it happened, the circumstances around it. She was elderly and had a history of heart problems, but the treatment she received in the hospital and in rehab and so forth really angered me. There was an attitude toward the elderly that they've had their life. She lived a good life. It's okay. It's okay for these old people to die. It's okay for us to
Mhm.
let these old people die and not give them any more care or twist the arms of insurance companies for more care, more tests, more surgeries, whatever. So I wrote it in anger, to tell you the truth. Now, I fictionalized the account because I had always been a big fiction writer. And I thought, I can make a different kind of story out of this. But in the book, Randall's mother becomes suddenly very critically ill, and the doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her. And frankly, they just don't want her around in the hospital. They don't know what's wrong with her. She's had a long, good life. So Randall's very perturbed by that. He
Mm.
begins to believe that maybe somebody is actually trying to murder his mother. And he goes to the police. And of course, there's no evidence of that. There's no chemistry coming from the hospital that would signal a murder. So Randall is kind of left on his own to try to save his mother's life and figure out why she's become so ill. And in doing that, it turns out Randall finally figures out Mama has a secret. There actually are people who might want her gone. And so that becomes the thriller part of the story. Who is it and how are they doing it? Because the weapon they're using has never been used in a murder mystery by any author ever before.
Dude, I mean, that's just crazy. Now, did you have fun writing? It sounds like, you get a little vengeance out there and at the same time, find some kind of healing process through this.
Not only did I have fun, just it's about 88,000 words or something, and they just flowed onto the page like nobody's business. I mean, this was a 6 to 8 week exercise, and I thought it was done. So here's the rest of the story. I went to an Atlanta Writers Club event where they had agents present.
Mm.
I got to talk to an agent, a really good guy from LA, and he said, "Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is hook you up with my editor," which he did. And so, I'm all happy and
Yippee.
thrilled. And so the editor goes through it, and she comes back to me and she says, "Well, it's really bad, but it's fixable." Because Lisa, I frankly had no idea of how real authors structure their stories, how they reveal their clues, how they hold out on the reader, but yet be fair to the reader. I had no idea that there were definitions of things like medical thriller. Okay, this one probably doesn't actually qualify. How about murder mystery? Well, no, because Mama doesn't die at the beginning. You're not looking for the killer. You just think there's one. So, it was a really interesting education for me, and I'll forever thank that woman for all the help she gave me. So it took me a lot longer to rewrite the book than it did to write it in the first place.
Well, you got your first draft done. Is that right? Is that more
Yeah,
of
well,
the
it,
term,
yeah,
you
the
know?
first ugly draft. Yep, yep.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing when you think about the process and the craft of writing. And I think that's the thing is, and it's great for readers to understand the blood, sweat, and tears that goes behind every word and page. So you must really love it, even though you had to fine tune everything.
No. I really do love it. Learned obviously a tremendous amount on the first book, and so I was able to apply all of those learnings the next time around, and I learned not to rush, but to take more care with the craft, as you were saying
Mhm.
earlier. And so my future first drafts were a lot better than my very first draft.
So what's it like to, because I know with Eddie Kovac, your books on him, you did the same kind of prequel and what's it like to go back to your first novel because you've had some breathing time in there and other stories written to go back and write the prequel? Did you have to reread what you've written?
I actually did. I actually did. So, I'm pretty elderly myself now, and I had forgotten a whole lot of things. I actually had to reread The Undiscovered Country and take notes to make sure, because there's a continuity factor, right? You can't be saying things in one book that are untrue in the other book if they're linked together, and they have to flow naturally. He couldn't be a completely different person in the prequel. He had to have the same moral compass. He had to experience the same point in time when he was growing up. The prequel is only about 3 years prior to the beginning of uh, The Undiscovered Country. So there's a lot of history that has to be the same for him in the prequel as it was in The
Mm.
Undiscovered Country.
What era is it set in?
Now, more or less.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
Undefined, sort of undefined now. I learned that as well as I've been writing books. Because my second novel I wrote actually during the pandemic, and we authors were all told, don't even mention it. We don't know what we're ever going to do about this pandemic period, but we don't want people walking around with masks over their faces. We don't want people who can't identify other people because they're wearing masks. We don't want people dying who aren't really a part of the story or getting ill during the story. So it's another technique that authors use, which is books can be timeless if you don't tie them to,
Cell phones and Facebook and,
well, or a current event or a catastrophe of some sort. Right? If it's not relevant to your story, you don't want to mention those things. They are outside the story. They are not going on.
it's funny because I bring up the Facebook because I remember interviewing an author. Gosh, it's got probably like 2010, maybe 2011. And in her novel, she mentions Facebook and she was stalking her ex-boyfriend on Facebook, the, main character. Sorry, I still don't like the word protagonist, as you may recall. But anyway, she's stalking and on Facebook. And I'm like, because I really didn't want to be on Facebook. And next thing you know, we were there at that point. So it was the beginning of Facebook and she was talking about that, and it had been around for a few years, but I was looking and seeing if it was going to be like MySpace and then your best friend on MySpace, Tom or whatever his name, was going to disappear. So I didn't know what was going to happen with it. And I went, oh, I suppose Facebook is staying if people are putting it in novels now. It's like, does the character have a BlackBerry versus an Apple or, all of that kind of thing can tell like what kind of car, and that's the thing too for photography for travel writers. You want to photograph something without a car in it because
Right.
a car will tell you where, you know what I mean? If you can, unless you want to do
Right.
that to capture modern history, right? So it's interesting what you say about that.
Yeah. So unless you're writing a historical novel or a novel whose setting historically is important somehow to the story, you don't want any time links in your book. None at all. So that your book can be timeless and people can read it 10 years from now and think we're talking about then. Yeah. So another element of craft.
That's funny, man. It's just like that whole, all these things. And so now you write your first novel. Did you get involved in groups and, getting beta readers and things like that?
I did. It's amazing how I'll tell you a cute little story real quickly. When I first thought I might write a book, I actually went to an event that was like 50 miles from my house at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, where they were going to talk about how to get published and give background on the industry and so forth. So I think it's going to be me and 15 lost souls, right? And I get there, Lisa, 350 people. Everybody in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, is writing a book. I mean, everybody is writing a book. So I'm privileged in so far as I'm actually the member of 4 writing communities, 4 different writing communities that are all more or less in the north of Georgia kind of area. So yeah, I can get all the feedback I want or don't want.
I think that's great, though. I think that's
It
fantastic.
is.
I
Yeah.
love it. So you're going to read a segment for us, a portion?
I read you a short portion. It's actually the very beginning of the book. And
Smart. Yeah.
I think it does a good job of sort of setting the scene, so to speak. Here we go. Although the handwritten nameplate on the door read Elaine Marks, the woman in the bed did not look like my mother. One low wattage light in the cold room leaked only enough illumination to reveal the woman's undignified state. Her face, obscured by an oxygen mask, was as gray as the worn pillowcase beneath her bony skull, and her steel gray hair lay in sweaty disarray, unlike the perfectly coiffed, jet black hair of the mother I embraced the day before I went to prison. This woman was smaller, much smaller. I could have switched on the bright overhead lights, but I didn't want to alert the staff to my presence. I wasn't prepared to see this scene any more clearly either. I took the woman's hand and recoiled at its coolness. In a panic, I leaned closer until I detected the weak flow of breath through the mask and the slight rise and fall of her shell-like chest. Then I checked the monitor on the wall above her bed. Heart rate, slow. Blood pressure, low. Respiratory rate, slow. Blood oxygenation level, low. Slow, low, slow, low, barely alive. Why weren't the doctors and nurses crowding around her bed? A crucifix, half hidden by the monitor, hung above the bed, a reminder that doctors didn't have total control of this situation. The insistent hum of pumps and monitors signaled technology's effort to keep my mother alive. The smell of illness assaulted me. I retched. Out of duty, I bent to kiss her forehead. She shuddered, whether from an involuntary response or recognition that I was with her, I didn't know. As a test, I whispered that I loved her. She did not react. With a tired sigh, I sank into the clumsy, overstuffed chair beside her bed. I remembered my promise to call Glenda, my daughter's mother, but rather than wake her at this hour, I texted her. So there's a reference. Made it safely. I'm fine. That was a lie. I was never fine in Augusta. Overnight, I had driven from my home in St. Pete Beach, Florida, through Ocala, diagonally across the state to Jacksonville, then northward to Savannah, where I exited I-95 and transitioned from the New South to the Old South. Using secondary roads paralleling the Savannah River, I drove through small towns raised by General Sherman during the Civil War and past shotgun houses, plantation manors, and oak trees as tall as a house and magnolia trees as wide. Through shadows so dense my headlights could not penetrate them, I passed mile after mile of cotton fields where I imagined slaves had once toiled. As the false dawn lit the horizon, I transitioned from Randall, the adult persona I had invented, to Jack, the child and the past I couldn't seem to escape. Today was just the 4th day since I had been released, and already I had been forced to exchange one nightmare for another. For only a moment, I closed my eyes to erase the vision of my mother in a hospital bed from the video screen in my brain.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And I remember Nancy and I reading this like when it first came out.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a while ago, but it takes me right back. You can reread books, as
I
you know.
do.
Yeah. Like we rewatch movies, don't we? We can reread
Oh,
books.
we do all the time. We complain constantly that there are no more good movies. And so we just pick a movie we once liked and do it again.
Well, I think you better get, your books into movies.
I would love that.
And I know that area, by the way, of Savannah, those roads, those back roads, like through Tybee Island and all. And then
Yep,
there's a fort out there.
yep,
I've driven. Oh, I love it. I adore that region. That's
yep.
just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Always good to have you on the show. Can't wait for next time. Next time, probably a new book. But we have more shows as we go. So always good to have you back on. So that next one, you're thinking spring, the pre.
I am. I am
Okay.
indeed.
So everyone get ready for it. So I say everyone should get this now, for the holiday season. Have a good book, a good cup of cocoa or, eggnog, whatever floats your boat, is a good thing for the winter and a good gift idea. So The Undiscovered Country is the book, and the prequel comes out in spring. So it's really cool to read this one now and get ready for the next. And you can go to MikeNemethAuthor.com, and it's linked in the episode notes. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you, Lisa. Always a pleasure.
Okay, so now we have Anna Dalhaimer Bartkowski, and I'm hoping I pronounced that right this time. She has been on the show before, all through our friends at Tucson Sisters in Crime, a wonderful organization for writers and mystery writers, and anybody who even just enjoys writers that deal in crime, mystery, suspense, and thriller, or Tucson, Arizona, or the Sonoran Desert, or all of Arizona. So I encourage you to go to Anna's website, which is annabartkowski.com. And Anna, did I get this right?
You got it right.
Did I? Do I get points?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I know. You've been on the show a few times, even on our family history, which
Yes.
leads us to your debut novel, which I think, this is interesting, right? It's called Dead Reckoning, a Rosalind Schmidt genealogical mystery paperback. And this was out in June of 2023. So was it family history that led you down the rabbit path to write, or have you always been writing?
It was family history. I had so many questions as a kid about why don't I have four grandparents? I only have one. Where did they live? Where did we come from? And so family history, well, in 3rd grade, my teacher sent us home for the weekend and said, find out where your family lived before they came to the United States. Now, for some people, who came over on the Mayflower, that, they kind of maybe knew, but it can be a challenge because it's not something people talk about. And I started talking about it then. And my goal with writing is to get families to keep talking about that. I think the more you dive into your family history, the more you learn that it's a very small, small world, and we're connected to everybody. I mean, I've covered relatives all over the world, but I want to share this. So I thought the best way to share this, I've done writing, some nonfiction, cookbooks, a number of things, but this was my debut novel. And I wanted to make something that reached out to that next generation who would be into reading novels, into murder mystery, and combine that with some historical fiction. I mean, it's really, Dead Reckoning is a historical family saga that's wrapped within a modern day Arizona murder mystery. And when this genealogist, Rosalind Schmidt, starts trying to track her world and find out about her ancestors, she discovers that one of her relatives may have been involved in a murder over 200 years ago. And then when she goes into work one day and finds a dead body, she's also having to struggle to clear her name from being the one who may have committed that murder. So it ties the two together, and Rosalind's the connecting peace back for her ancestors, who in this book, what they did, they were living in the Germanic states. This was in the 1760s. So we've got 1760s, we've got the 2014 in Arizona, we've got the two different time frames, and she's trying to piece all these pieces together of murder mystery and family and who did what. And they lived in the Germanic states, but they had been torn apart by war. This gentleman, Christoph Schmidt, who's the main character in the historical fiction piece, he just comes back from war, finds his family dead. He can't stay there. He can't stomach war anymore. When he sees a flyer that's Catherine II of Russia, the Empress, who becomes known to us as Catherine the Great, but at that time she was Catherine II. She's offering free land, free transportation, freedom of religion, exemption from military service in perpetuity, and no taxes for 10 years, 30-year repayment on any loan.
Can we have her as leadership? I'd like her to be our leader at this.
She tried to be very innovative. She was so well read. She was phenomenal. But then when the French Revolution came and she saw what happened to Louis and Marie Antoinette, she became a little bit more conservative. But she was very smart. She was a German princess from Anhalt-Zerbst, and she was picked to marry Peter, not Peter the Great. He was the nephew of the Tsarina Elizabeth, and she married him. Peter, let's put it simply, he was a putz. He was very Prussian, and the Russian people, though Russian and Prussian sound similar, Russian is very different. And when Catherine was brought there, she was like, I have to survive. And you know how cutthroat living in the palace would be. If you've watched any of the intrigues of any royalty, you know there's always something going on. She indoctrinated herself to the Russians. She became Russian Orthodox, which Peter would have never considered. And just, she made herself Russian because she was a survivor. She was like, this is my role and this is what I have to do. But she needed help settling her kingdom. So she made an offer. It was in her second manifesto. She offered that people could come and help her and farm her land. And people responded. People were tired of the wars in the Germanic states. The 7 Years' War had just ended. Before that, it was the 30 Years' War. They were tired of this stuff. Land, which they weren't going to get in the Germanic states. They were just going to be peasants working the fields for some prince. They got their own land to choose their religion. They could choose their own culture. They got to continue to. How many people invite people to come to their country and say, you can keep your own language? That's perfectly fine. You can self-govern yourself in these areas. So Catherine made an offer that was very difficult to refuse.
Wow, that's amazing, huh?
So
Amazing
that's
history.
Rosalind's ancestry, and she's figuring this all out. And that's when she starts to have dreams about her ancestors, in particular, who turns out she wasn't certain how it all connected, but I'll give you a heads up. He's her fifth great grandfather.
Well, when she's having these dreams, well, I have them over ancestors too, and I've had to go through all kinds of stuff to figure out Hungarians, and mostly on that side, and then we got other. Anyway, we're all connected to those regions too, and I find it fascinating because there's these stories of strength and survival, just like you said, she was like the queen. Here she is, Catherine the Great, going, okay, I've got to survive, and this is how I'm going to do it. Whether or not she really wants to do it that way, it's this extra strength. And I think through these kinds of novels, for women especially, we get this, okay, we're just going to do it a different way. And sometimes just the bold move of, this isn't right, this is, all that kind of stuff doesn't always work. You have to be strategic.
Right.
And so that's kind of cool what you're writing about, of showing that as a woman's strength, to maneuver forward and then bringing things into present time. And also murders. Okay, the murder mystery part.
Yes.
That's interesting to me because you think of palaces too. There's always someone lurking in the shadows.
And listening and eavesdropping on private conversations and all that. Yes.
Wow. I just watched a military war thing of going through buildings in an actual battle.
Yeah.
And it made me really realize like why policemen have backup and things like that. And when you think of a castle, eek.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's, I mean, there are people who comment, they'll say certain things about Catherine. I'm like, you weren't in her shoes. And it's always easy to criticize someone, you know, but men were doing this stuff long ago and she had to she wanted to survive.
Well, you've got excellent reviews on the novel, Dead
Thank you.
Reckoning. I've
Thank
seen that.
you.
I'm like, okay. And authors love reviews,
Yes,
So I'm
I
just
do.
saying, so they do. But this is what's so cool about this is like through storytelling, I think you're also getting people intrigued of their own family history. Was that part of your goals?
Was goal number one. I want people to be able to ask questions. I mean, I started asking questions probably even before the third grade, but I distinctly remember the third grade. And, now my parents, my grandmother, they're gone. I don't have anyone to ask, but I want to make sure my kids understand where they come from. And they've seen me speak so much, they've probably like, okay, mom, we got it. But I am learning something new about my ancestry every day. And of course, I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it. But I think if people would do a little investigation and just find out a little bit about the background, some people don't want to talk about it. And my grandmother, she lived in Russia up until 1913. She saw a lot. She wasn't always willing to talk about it. In fact, when she saw the movie Dr. Zhivago, she said that was true to life. She was like, she didn't really like it. And, I think a lot of us admire, but do I like the movie? It's a quality movie. I'm glad I've watched it. But now I understand why she said, no, I don't like it because it was just too true to life for what she experienced. She was
No,
there.
and yeah, you have your choice of how you want to deal with it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that generation too is a little bit more stiff upper lip, keep it quiet, move
Right.
on, and then we get to deal with it later. That's the
Right.
next
So,
generations, right?
and I think we're in a generation now where if the younger people ask, they'll get some answers.
And they want to fix.
Or it might prompt even their elders to do a little bit more digging
Mm.
and figure out, well, what happened here? Who did this? I think it's a family conversation everyone should be having.
This is perfect timing for the holiday season coming up too.
Right.
For when you're gathered around, maybe stuff politics out the window and put it in the oven. No, we
Right.
want food, good food, and start talking about the history because then maybe you'll learn because through history, there's going to be negatives as we've talked on the family history shows with you before. There's going to be negative stuff, but then how do we reconcile with that? How do we make a positive path forward? And
Right.
sometimes the negative stuff is also to do with what was happening in that era. And so
Absolutely.
we aren't there. We certainly can do better and maybe also learn from the good stuff. So I think this is perfect for the holiday season. And you went on to write some more after this, right?
I've written a couple children's books, Conrad the Camel, and it's the adventures of Conrad the Candle Wanderlust. It's about one of the stories my grandmother told me was, well, we had horses and we ran the farm, and she was describing what they did. And she said, oh, and we had camels. And I'm like, camels in Russia? I couldn't picture it. So I kept looking for evidence or no evidence, or was she crazy or what was going on? She was absolutely right. I have found pictures. I have found a lot of information. There's an old film that was done that shows some of the camels in the area of Russia where my grandmother lived. So it's, I've written that and I've been working on the sequel to Dead Reckoning. It's called Ancestral Shadows. That's going to be coming out soon in 2026. So,
Awesome.
so the
Awesome.
second one will be coming.
All right. So in that vein, get everybody ready for that by giving us a little reading, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, this is Dead Reckoning, and I'm going to start. I kind of told you about why Christoph wanted to go to Russia, and I'm going to read a part where he's having to, stand in line, and these recruiters are telling them what to do. So I'm going to just dig right in here. After 20 minutes of fidgeting in line, Christoph realized he was next. He listened to what the men asked the family in front of him. He also tried to hear how the family answered. He did not want to be denied this opportunity. "Come forward, please," said the man seated in the middle behind the table. Christoph stepped forward. The man raised his eyes and stared at Christoph's worn clothing. "Name?" the man asked. "Christoph Schmidt." He shuffled his feet to gain his bearings on the solid, soggy ground. "Age, year, and place of birth?" "I'm 24 years old, born in 1741 in Ansbach," said Christoph. "And your family?" "I don't have any family. They are gone." He lowered his head to hide his eyes. He noticed the rain slowed to a light drizzle. "No family? Go over to the line outside the blacksmith shop." Christoph hesitated. He always did as he was told, but he was concerned he may have lost his chance. He raised his hat so his eyes looked at the man who would determine his future. Christoph breathed in and summoned his strength to stay calm. "Why?" he asked. "You will need support to begin your life in Russia." Christoph exhaled. "And what happens outside the blacksmith shop?" "Every few hours, we match people together to build families. In other words, before you board the ship to Russia, you must be married." Christoph gasped. His eyes nearly bulged out of his sockets. He had sworn to be alone for the rest of his days. He knew he should not swear, but he had given his heart to Margarita and their 2 children. When he returned to their home after the war, to the burnt fields, the war-ravaged land, he found the 3 of them deserted in the house without food to eat, and his heart collapsed. The children were already in heaven. Margarita was 2 days away from joining them. He did everything he could, but it was too late. She could not eat and barely recognized him. All joy was gone, and his future did not matter. After burying them on the land they had called home, he decided then and there he would not endure a loss like that again. And he could not stay on the land that had taken his family from him. After roaming the countryside aimlessly, doing odd jobs for farmers and tradesfolk, he saw the flyer and made his choice for Russia, alone. "Is there a problem, Herr Schmidt?" "No," Christoph whispered. His plans now changed. To have a chance at this dreamed future, he must marry today.
Whoa. Now
That's
with
really-
with Marguerite dying and the children, it's also I don't it's also a form of murder to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the people who make these decisions about war,
It's murder.
war is never the answer. I think I've written that in this book, and I think I wrote it in the next one.
Yes.
We're smarter than that.
Yes.
We should act smarter than that. Some people are, but the personal gain of selling
Yes.
munitions or whatever the reasons, there's always a reason why someone chooses that. And I just think we need to think again.
I agree. Well, with that, thank you, Anna. It's been good to have you back on. And everyone, again, the link is in the episode notes. You can go to annabartkowski.com, and that's Anna, ANNABARTKOWSKI. I'm just, showing that I can spell because it's all in front of me. That's why. Well, thank you so much and continued success. We'll know you'll be on a show again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate your time.
So we're excited to have Clifford Garstang back on Big Blend Radio. I encourage you to go to his website, cliffordgarstang.com, and check out all of his books. He's got short story collections, essays, and novels. And as you know, today is all about debut novels. But first, welcome back, Cliff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Lisa. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Hey, now, I know you just came back from Portugal. Is travel part of helping you be a fabulous writer?
Absolutely. I've always told people that travel really helps you open your eyes and see things in a different light. And I think that's so important for a writer. If you just sit in your office all the time and don't see anything, your imagination can only take you so far. So I love to go places and see new things.
Now, I know you started off with collections of stories, right? That
Right.
was the beginning, and then it led up to the novel. So, how many books do you have that are, fiction at this point, novels and the collections included?
6 are published.
I mean, to me, even just writing one or even writing one story that's good I'm sorry, but even, one story is hard to get it,
Yes, it
blood,
is.
blood, sweat, and tears. So tell us about your very first novel.
So, it's a little tricky subject because my second book, which is a collection of stories, I called a novel in stories. So, but we're not going to count that one because a lot of people just think it's stories. And indeed, the this is what the John Boys know. That was 12 short stories that I said made up a whole narrative arc. And but that was kind of a gimmick that I was playing in order to help get it published. But as soon as that came out, I started working on a real novel, and I drew inspiration for that from my experience living in South Korea in the 1970s. And I have a painting over my fireplace of it's a mountain god. And so I started working on this idea of kind of a supernatural story. In fact, my working title was Descent of the Mountain God. So as if this mountain god would come down the mountain and be visited on people. And that morphed significantly. And the book turned out to be a story about a Virginia young man living in the mountains with his family who joins the army, and he is stationed in South Korea in the early 90s after the first Gulf War. And he meets and marries a young, very young Korean woman and brings her back to the States. So she is traumatized for a number of reasons, including the culture shock of being in rural Virginia, but she also practices Korean shamanism. And I was just enthralled by what I knew about shamanism when I lived there. I had studied it a little bit. And the idea that her shamanistic practices were somewhat similar to the Appalachian healing customs that she encountered when she came to Virginia. So all of that got mixed together and turned into my book, The Shaman of Turtle Valley, which is right there. And one of the things I enjoyed about it was the parallels between the American Civil War and then the Korean War of the 50s, where we have the experience of brother versus brother and lands divided. So this particular location in the book is right on the border of West Virginia. So there's this West Virginia divide that's sort of similar to the North and South Korea. So I had lots to work with there and lots of themes that I enjoyed exploring.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you being on a show talking about it. I think that's the thing about travel is there's always something different to learn about, and there's always a commonality to connect with. And I think your book really did that. And yet at the same time, because she really was trying to even understand and fit in to the cult, the lifestyle.
So she had lots of challenges, and you kind of want that in a book, a novel, because it creates conflict and tension and also makes people want to read to figure out how folks are going to resolve those problems.
I remember when I first read it that you took me to the Appalachians and we hadn't been there yet. Remember, I was like, are you in Virginia, West Virginia? I didn't quite know my states yet, even.
Right.
And just there was like a mystical feeling to it about what the Appalachian region was. So there was a sense of place that drew me wanting to go there just from that,
Great.
Just the scenery, there's just that atmosphere. And I remember one of the first times we got into the Appalachian region, I'm like, Cliff, you're right. It's beautiful. It's going to call you and say, Cliff, we're here, but it's the whole region is just, there is a mysticism to it. There's a mystical, magical, but there is that underlying something else. It's almost like a Southern fiction kind of thing, yet a little different. But there's always something, that element in Southern fiction that, I don't know, I love that. There's just something in the swamp that is not just an alligator kind of thing.
But I also think that because the settlers who came to the region, the Scots-Irish in particular, brought with them a lot of their mythology and traditions. And when you start looking at these folk customs, from around the world, there are a lot of similarities. And that's what really, I think makes the story here is because the main character's mother is from this line of Appalachian healing women, and she and the Korean girl don't get along, but they do discover that they are kind of doing the same thing.
And then, for him, I mean, he also had to go through culture shock going overseas, so there's like two
Yes, he certainly
sides to
and
that.
yeah, and coming back because he did it seems like I'm often writing about people who don't quite fit in, and they are trying to figure out what their place is in society, and so when he comes back from the army, he is trying to figure out if he really belongs in this rural mountain valley, and he is also trying to fit in back into his family, so all of that is, again, creates tension.
And I think we all go through that if we're doing something in life. If you're just sitting in the same place and not going and doing things, you know what I mean? Things will happen to you. That's number one. There is no safe space in the world, but fitting in and trying to, that's a huge, I mean, I went through that my whole life, especially being a kid traveling to different countries. And I went to 16 schools, so I identify with it. And I always knew the drill is the first day, everybody's like curious. You got a different accent, maybe a different color skin. And it's like, you're a novelty. Second, third day, all right, we're tired of her now. And, who cares? And now you're going to get in trouble again. So it's just this very interesting thing, that dynamic. And then trying to, like you're saying, fit in, or do you want to fit in? Do you care? It's
Right.
almost like coming of age, but it's not.
And then in this case, Aiken, the main character, and his wife Sun-hee have a young son, 3 and 4 years old in the story, Henry, and he's got his own issues because he's not sure where he fits either. His parents aren't living together. He's back and forth between them. He's mixed race. He speaks both Korean and English to his parents, and he's kind of confused.
Well, yeah. So everybody finds their part to identify with. Yeah, I like that. So are you going to read a little for us?
I would love to read a little bit. I was trying to decide what to read. It's been quite a while since I read from this book. Most of the book is written from the point of view of Aiken, who is the Virginia man, former GI. But when I first wrote this, it was all in his point of view, and I later added the points of view of the various women in his life because he was pretty clueless, and the reader recognizes that he's not very with it when it comes to dealing, especially with women. So I wanted to add the points of view of his mother, his wife, his ex-girlfriend, his cousin, people who would really point out what he doesn't know. And so this short section, just a couple of pages, is from the wife's point of view. Her name is Sun-hee, and she refers to their son Henry as Hanul, which is a Korean word meaning heaven, but it's her close pronunciation to Henry. I don't think I have to explain anything else in this. Chapter 17. Hanul and I both think of Aiken. We stand by the window and watch for him to return. A truck passes, and Hanul waves and waits. To keep his mind off his father, we play games. In the yard, it is hot, but we play konki noli, a game from my childhood. I find 5 pebbles and throw them on the ground. Then I show Hanul. I pick up one and toss it in the air, snatch another pebble off the ground, and catch the first one. Then I toss the 2 pebbles and snatch another. It is a game for girls, but Hanul laughs, and it makes me happy to hear him laugh. Hanul is happy with this game, but I think of Aiken on his family's farm in the big, angry house filled with spirits, hungry ghosts. When we came here 4 years ago, I did not want to stay in such a house, but where could I go? I had no other home but with Aiken and the family of Aiken, my new family. It is my place as the wife to become daughter to my husband's mother, to work in her house, but the spirits were too strong, too angry. First time I saw the father of Aiken, I feel his spirit. He touched me with his hands, his body, and I feel warmth, like my own poor father. I prayed for him, prayed that the God of his mountain would protect him. There is great distance between Aiken and the father, but I pray. When I see the mother of Achan, I cannot look in her eyes. I am afraid she will see me as I see her. She is not my mother, but I know her, my new mother. Inside the house, the voices are loud, like never before in my head, like the mudang says. They want to speak, but I cannot understand. They are angry, and I cannot stay inside with them. I fly out and run through fields, no rice or millet like home, but the rocky hills, mountains, they are the same. I feel the same warmth there on the mountain, the same power as at home. The pine trees, they are the same. The streams and the birds, they are the same. I run and run until I find my place to rest. In this dark cave, there are rocks, pink with bright spots, and I take them into the sunlight where they glitter and shine. I pile one on top of another. It is my poor gift to the god of this mountain to ask his blessing for the father of Achan. I remember poems from my school days about the shrine on the mountain. The poet I Young sings of my mountain and its power to mend. The sparse clouds swirl above me, and I turn with them and close my eyes to hide the sun. The memory takes me home. The voices here on the mountain only whisper, not like in the house. They are peaceful, and they welcome me. An old man and a girl, like my sister, they are at rest. I sit on hard, dry land, like stone. From here I see the house, falling roof, chimney that bends like a young tree in the wind. I feel the baby rumble inside, the baby who will be Hanul. I close my eyes to calm my stomach. I hear the footsteps approach. Well, hello. It is a man's voice. I open my eyes. His white beard flows to his chest, and he carries a thick, gnarled stick that he lifts as if he means to strike. I duck, but the stick drops to his shoulder, and his deep laughter rolls across the hills like thunder. A big orange cat, striped like a tiger, weaves through his legs. I stumble to my feet, afraid, and run downhill, down, tumbling toward the house, away from this mountain god. Now I long to see the mountain god once more, to guide us, to protect us.
Very cool. Very cool, Cliff. I love that. I'm going to go reread it now. I do. I do. Yeah. And to be able to do the interior dialogue like that, that inner conversation, I think that's one of the beauties of books because we all do that. And then we're already having a conversation with them in a way,
Right.
that inner, yeah, it's like we're all in that the way I don't know. That's a whole thing about humans that we can have these conversations in our head,
One of the great things about writing, one of the fun things about writing is inhabiting the minds of your characters. And I write from a lot of different points of view. Her point of view is not a huge part of the book, but it still adds some flavor to the overall narrative. And I like it. It spices it up a bit.
Awesome. Well, everyone, cliffordgarstang.com is the website to go to. It is the holiday season, so I'm just reminding everyone it's time to fill stockings with books. Actual books, you can email books, you can Kindle books, you can do books, audiobooks, all kinds. But before you go, I wanted to let people know you're also on Substack as we're climbing into that world of Substackies. You're doing your Substack really tells people about your life overseas, which is fascinating. And I think that gives people that insight of how you're building all these stories and the characters and the life over in different countries. But so everyone can find you, just type in Clifford Garstang on there, right? To find you?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And what's next for you since you've just come back from Portugal? Is there, another book in the works?
Well, there is a book in the works. It's not about Portugal, but I am actually finishing a book right now, very close to the end, and even beginning to work on the next one, which is a long story. But yeah, so there is a new book coming.
Wow. When you know you're getting towards the end, do you start typing faster? It's like when you turn a horse to go home, it starts galloping home because it knows there's food.
Yeah. So I have a writing residency coming up next month, and I am keen to just sit with the book and make sure it's saying what I want to say.
Very cool. Well, we're excited, and you got to keep us posted.
I will. Yeah.
We're here. All right. Well, thanks so much, Cliff. Always fun.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Art Show. Please keep up with us at bigblendradio.com and keep up with Big Blend magazines at blendradioandtv.com.